Baruchim Aboyim to the 11th and continuing series of Shiurim on the Yud Gimel Ikkarim of the Rambam, 13 principles of Maimonides. And the last two times we've spoken about the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, divorced Moshe Rabbeinu. And we're going to continue on that because there's, obviously, a lot more to speak about. The Rambam, as we've seen, writes clearly that Moshe Rabbeinu achieved the highest intellectual level of any person who had ever lived before him and of any person who will live after them. That's what the Rambam says in the 7th principle. And this is clearly the right. The Rambam says this in mentions many places, but I wanted to actually focus on with the Rambam. What is this level of intellect that the Rambam speaks about? The level of intellect we mentioned yesterday is even though Moshe Rabbeinu is the person who received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nonetheless the level of intellect which Moshe Rabbeinu achieved is something which is an intellectual view of the world, a perception of the world, which is not only limited to the mitzvahs. The Rambam makes this pretty clear in chapter 54 at the end of volume 3 of the Moreh Nevuchim, where he lists actually chochma as being a perfection higher than that of the mitzvahs, most of the mitzvahs, except for perhaps the Leshem and Elokecha. But actually, a understanding of this intellectual level is actually provided in chapter 54 of volume 1 in the guide in the Moreh Nevuchim, Perek Nun Daled. Chelek Aleph, Perek Nun Daled, and in the Schwartz edition, this the chapter begins at 1:30, and we continue at 1:31. So Moshe Rabbeinu, once again in the famous dialogue in Parshas Kisisa, Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "Hoidiyani Drachecha." Okay, he wanted to know the ways which HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with people in the world. Chazal say Moshe Rabbeinu wants to know why he's a tzaddik v'raloi, why is your misfortune to tzaddikim, to the righteous, Rosha v'tovloi, why do the Rishonim, wicked people seem to prosper? And when he asked this question, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't give it an answer. After that, right, and I'm reading from here, page 131. After that, Moshe Rabbeinu asked for something which is actually made a stronger request. I guess he wanted to see God in of himself. So says the Rambam, so he wasn't on the second request that he made. He wasn't granted. You can't see my face, and of course that's the famous negative theology of the Rambam, which we've spoken about. The Rambam says Moshe Rabbeinu, right? On the other hand, though, what about show me your ways? So the HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers him and says, Ani ave kol tuvi al panecha. I'm going to show you all of my goodness. What does this mean? V'ilul devarav. I'm reading now from the Schwartz edition, page 131. This is the third paragraph. V'ilul devarav, that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, kol tuvi. Roim zim shitzig lefales and nitzoim kula. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him the entire, all of reality. He showed him all of physical reality. Right? Like it says in Bereshis, Vayalokim es kol asher asa v'nei tov ba'oid. That's called tuvi lefanecha. Behitzik lefanav, what does it mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him all of reality? Says the Rambam, Kavanasi, shehisik es tivam, vizkashusam zeh bazeh. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the grand unified field theory, both of the four forces of physics and also biology too. He showed him as tivam, the nature of everything in the world, vizkashusam zeh bazeh, how they're all connected. Kach shehu yoda es hanugat shalakel oisam. Therefore he knows how the HaKadosh Baruch Hu directs them, how he acts with them. Keitzadi b'chol v'prat, how it is in general and how it is in detail. Who Havin, right? Who he understood. Goes on the Rambam, Moshe Rabbeinu understood et mitzias oilamo kuloi. He understood the reality of the entire world, havana amisis, a true knowledge, a true understanding of the entire world, bas kayama, which would last forever, sharei ledeos halonachonis ein kiyum masiv, because if a person has the wrong philosophy, this is sure to fall. Hasagas maisim elu eifas agaso to olam is Allah Hashem v'chinosom he is Allah noida. So in other words, understanding all of these things is, of course, apprehending the Ikkarim, in other words, the midas, right, the ethical nature of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu apprehended the truth of the entire creation and its interconnection. That's in fact actually what the Rambam says. Okay? So in other words, there's no question about it that when the Rambam says that Moshe Rabbeinu achieved a level of intellect greater than any person will ever achieve in history, greater than anyone achieved before him and greater than any person will achieve afterwards, the Rambam means that he understood, he had the deepest knowledge of the entire cosmos, of all of natural reality, its interconnections. Moshe Rabbeinu apprehended the highest level of science that anyone will ever be able to apprehend. That's what the Rambam says. Okay, now, so this is clear that this is certainly the Rambam's understanding that not only this is the intellectual apprehension of Moshe Rabbeinu, but this, of course, was necessary, right, for him to be the Moshe Torah, to give the Torah. Okay. Now, lo and behold, though, this issue comes to a head in actually the revelation of the Kabbalah of the Ari. And in particular, I'm going to take a look at what the Tanya, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tanya writes in the Ikkarim HaKodesh, right? One of the parts of the Sefer Tanya was called the Ikkarim HaKodesh, and it's Perak Yutes. Perak Yutes, which in the standard edition of the Tanya, which I have in front of me, is Daf Kuf Chav Zayin. Says the Tanya, he quotes the Ari. Hinei b'lekutei Torah shel Arizal, lekutei Torah the Arizal in Parshas Kisisa. Okay, that's obviously the parsha that we speak about this. Okay, and also in Parshas Vayikra, Kasiv Kosav, the Ari writes. This is the Tanya now quoting the Ari. Ki hasagas Moshe Rabbeinu, the apprehension of Moshe Rabbeinu, lo yhoisa b'pchinas pinimius the chochma ilah. It was not I guess I would say the internal higher wisdom, right? Which is called, he gives it a name in Kabbalah, which I don't know Kabbalah. He calls it Abba Datzilos, whatever that means. But Kol Shekain, and certainly Moshe Rabbeinu's apprehension was not in the sphere of Kesser, Shelamayla Mimena, which is actually above this, which is called Arich Pin. But rather, in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu did not apprehend these higher worlds of wisdom, says the Ari. But rather, his apprehension was b'pchinas ocharayim de chochma, was perhaps like a lower part of chochma, the back of chochma, whatever that means. Hamlubeshes b'bina b'sbeshes b'zayin spil tachtonish nikras anpin so the Torah b'spateshes etc. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu apprehended a lower part of wisdom, which garbs itself, which clothes itself within the lower worlds, right? V'sham haisa nevuasai, and therefore his nevuah was in these lower worlds. That's what the Ari says. Okay, it's not important to go into Kabbalistic details. I don't understand what these things mean anyway, but I'll leave that for your knowledge or understanding. Or okay, now
you knew that the existence of these upper levels, you just didn't understand them?
That's what this. Wait, 1 second. The Ari says that was his hasaga. Avolamayla, above these worlds, lo haisa lo shum hasaga. He had no apprehension, right, of the internal part of wisdom, the panemius, but rather the acharayim of chochma, which garbs itself within these lower things. This is what the Ari says. Okay, now, up to now the Ari. Ad kan the Ari, mikan ve'elech the Tanya. U'lachayra, writes the Tanya. I'm now on page 254, in the standard edition of the Tanya. Ulechayre yesh lahafli. Said the Baal Tanya, this is incredible. Harei, Nemar, it says in the Torah, V'loi kam Navi oid b'Yisrael k'Moshe. There's no Navi, right? There will be never a prophet, any more prophet greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. The Ech Hisik Arizal, Yosef Imenu. How could the Arizal have apprehended more than Moshe Rabbeinu? The Dorash, Kama Drushim. Now, how we know the Arizal apprehended more than Moshe Rabbeinu? Because it says the Baal Tanya, the Dorash Kama Drushim, right? The Primis, Afilu Besfilos, Madreus, Rabbi Shlomal Biachol, the Kesed Atzilus. The Arizal has Drushim, which speak about worlds even higher than the higher part of chochma, of wisdom, and of kesser. He speaks about in detail of these worlds. So comes the Baal Tanya, and he speaks about it. Acha inyan pashut. I'm going to go a little further in the Baal Tanya because I think it's important to Acha inyan pashut to move on lakol. Right? Everybody right? Sheyesh hefresh gadol. There's a distinction between hasagas chochmas emes kerashbi v'Arizal, between the apprehension of the truth of the Rashbi and the Arizal. She hasagas chochma v'das, which is the apprehension of chochma v'das. Uvein hasagas Moshe Rabbeinu, between the apprehension of Moshe Rabbeinu, ushar neviya, b'nevuah, right? Hamachunu b'kosav b'shem riyah mamish, which is a vision, a scene. V're'isas hachoyrai, v'es Hashem v'yirei elav, etc., etc. Shizel derech Moshe v'enu riyas ayin basa, of course to say, not a physical apprehension. Mikama kamanishul doim l'mashu, kadom v'yirei, it has to basically this. He says this is galus that comes to them. Okay, he goes into the entire thing, and he says, right, that asagas chaba emes shaloi nigla leim havaya nelam, right? Miracle she was seeking to lose chochma. Move from amu chacham adaf minavi, right? Right, that he's masik a chochma lamaila maila mimadrega shuchol leire lamatim b'chinas is galus levi. In other words, somehow the asaga, the apprehension of the chachamim, is they apprehend a chochma which is lamaila, higher and higher, from the levels, right? That, in other words, for the levels that of the isgalus, the vision, the revelation that comes from the v'yim b'mal nevuasa. So he speaks about this. In other words, so therefore, once again, he goes into this in detail, explains what this is. By the way, this is not the Baal Tanya. Rav Tzadok also speaks about this too in several places, but there's no question about it. In other words, Rav Tzadok wants to say, I'm not sure the Baal Tanya says it, that Moshe Rabbeinu's apprehension means that his apprehension was much more intuitive. But in any case, right, however we want to understand this, there's no question about it that according to the Baal Tanya, right, in Hachinami, the apprehension of the Arizal went to higher levels than that, to the Moshe Rabbeinu. I should mention that Rav Tzadok adds somewhere that in fact that this is from the standpoint of the Nevuah. Moshe Rabbeinu was possible of apprehending levels of chochma higher. Right, Machshavas Charutz. But nonetheless, in terms of his Nevuah, which is of course Torah and mitzvahs, that is a lower level of apprehension. Okay, now, so it's interesting, this is where the Baal is. Now, what I wanted to take note that it seems to me that this understanding of the relationship of the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu to the Arizal, which appears in the Baal Tanya, is in fact challenged by none other than the Nefesh HaChaim, Chaim V'Loshana. Of course, Chaim V'Loshana is not telling us who he's challenging, but as with much of the Nefesh HaChaim, if not most of the Nefesh HaChaim, being a de facto commentary in Perush on the Tanya, it's clear that what he says in Shah Aleph Perek Tezvav is coming, in fact, to take issue, strong issue, with this, certainly with what the Baal Tanya says. Is he taking issue with the Ari? I'm not sure. He doesn't quote the Ari. He doesn't offer a new interpretation of the Ari. In any case, Reb Chaim Volozhin begins Perek Tezvav, Nefesh HaChaim, speaking about these three parts of a person's what's called his general neshama, which is nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Right, the lowest level of the neshama, nefesh, and there's he makes as a parable. A person blows into glass. So when the air is inside the glass, that's called the nefesh. Because Baruch Hu blows air into man. So when the air is within man, that's called the nefesh. When the air is reaching into the mouth of man, that's called ruach. A person's neshama is always outside of him. It's in kiviyachol, the lungs of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Well, that's a person's neshama, and of course that's the bechina of what's called chochma. You love chochma. Okay, so says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, Omnam bechinas haneshama, the bechina of neshama, he haneshima atzma shepnimius atzmusa b'steros be'elam. This is the neshima itself, shepnimius atzmusa, that the pnimius of it, mistateros be'elam, is hidden. U'makayra bar kiviyachol b'tei neshima spirit bar, and its source is kiviyachol within the breath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. She'ein atzmus ma'usa nefeset klal l'ter guf adam. Of course, this doesn't enter at all into the physical body of a person. For Adam HaRishon could mechet zochel atzmusa. Adam HaRishon, before the chet, actually had this neshama within him. Uv'sibas hachet nistalka mitoichoi, and because of the chet, it left him. V'nish'ara rach chayfefes halav. It was just sort of like hovering above him. That's Adam HaRishon. Levad Moshe Rabbeinu, alav hashalom. This is Moshe Rabbeinu, alav hashalom. Shezocha liatzmusa toich gufo. Moshe Rabbeinu actually had the neshama within his guf. V'lachein nikra ish Elokim. He's called ish Elokim. Ki yadu shekol ha'gimel ha'olam is b'yitzi asira b'chad neshama d'l'hoim ha'mayla hu elokus gomor. It's chayim, etc., etc. V'zulasa lo yizocha eleya shum adam. No person ever reached this level. Rak bihilas nitzotzei or minotzim mimeno al moshe adam zechalav. Maybe it could be, sparkles of light. Kol echad lefi matigasai. So in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was zeicher to this neshama, this higher level of chochma, obviously, right, within him. The entire chochma being part of him.
How did I understand about chochma and not nevuah?
No, because it's clear. Bechinas, Rabbi HaChaim says in several places that ruach, of course, ruach is neshama is always connected chochma. He speaks about a person is chayte b'machshava. That's the bechina of neshama. What's he saying here? He's arguing about Tanya. Chas v'shalom. One shouldn't think that there was any part of neshama which is chochma that was beyond Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, what Nefesh HaChaim is saying is the reason that people cannot apprehend aspects of chochma is because their neshama, their chochma is hidden within nishmas piv, within the breath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and because of that they cannot apprehend this, except for after Adam HaRishon. But Moshe Rabbeinu had the entire neshima of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within him, which means comes Yari and is arguing, certainly on the Tanya. That's not true. There's no bechina, there's no aspect, there's no dimension of the higher wisdom which is beyond Moshe, hidden from Moshe Rabbeinu. So I see from this and now why is this important for us? For a very simple reason. The question is, what is the role of the Ari with respect to Torah and mitzvahs? The Nefesh HaChaim goes on in Shara Aleph and says that even though the Avos HaKadoshim of Yitzchak and Yaakov perceived spiritual worlds and acted on those worlds sometimes in ways in which would appear to be a contradiction to the Torah which was given at Sinai. He says, as Yaakov Avinu married two sisters. He says, once the Torah was given, therefore no one, chas v'shalom, right, can possibly, in fact, actually, act based upon them, right? If it in any way contradicts the Torah that was revealed at Sinai. And he says, and he writes here in Perach Beis, Kitame mitzvahs atachlisam, lo yizgalo adayin l'shem adam ba'olam. When I revealed to any person, he says even to Moshe Rabbeinu, even Adam HaRishon, and then he speaks about the Torah Kedosha, etc., etc., and then at the final end of Shar Aleph, he takes on the Ari and says, "Umish zikal yizboch tzuma lahazing this Torah Kedosha she's el baruch kadish al yonim b'chas be'al Tanya gegun Rashbi and the Ari, right? Who rock kadeshi is boinin kol echad lefi sichel v'sagasa. There are people should be misboin on this, should think about it. Ad heichen megiyim kol piltei ma'asav v'dibur, of how far, in what ways that his actions affect the worlds, right? And he should draw inspiration from this, l'kaimis ha-mitzvahs, right? B'tachlis adiktu v'ein v'yira. But certainly, that's only the nafkamina. In other words, the Ari wrote, based upon his Kabbalah, kavanas of the mitzvahs. But, in other words, Nefesh HaChaim understood that the purpose of these were not that a person should actually think through them, but rather a person should draw inspiration from them. Because if a person would act upon them, then it might be that, as has been brought up by the Paiskim, there's a Devar Baruchim, that in fact actually there are things which seem to, in a certain sense, appear to be not in accordance with the revealed Torah in the halacha. So in other words, I think that this is really, in other words, here Reb Chaim Volozhin is in fact taking very strong issue, certainly with the Tanya, maybe even with the Ari, or at least interpreting the Ari differently. The Ari spoke about these things to inspire people, but in fact actually, certainly, there's nothing that the Ari revealed that Moshe Rabbeinu, right, did not apprehend. And if the Ari just speaks about things, that's only to inspire people. It's not coming that, it's not an apprehension in a sense, perhaps with Reb Chaim Volozhin, that a person should act in accordance with it when it comes within a halacha context. I think really that's what Nefesh HaChaim is saying. Yeah.
Is this the same idea that any chiddush that comes around today has its source by Moshe Rabbeinu, that there's no...
That might be. Certainly he would, he doesn't say that, but certainly in your Testament based in Megillah, what much called Tamid Vasuk Yochel L'Chadesh. Now, of course, one would say that maybe that's speaking about Chidushim Halacha. But, in other words, it could possibly be that what anyone's B'Chadesh in any aspect of Torah, any aspect of chochma would be from Moshe Rabbeinu.
Well,
but in other words, yeah.
You could also say that he was shown it, not necessarily was he able to... When we see that he was sitting in the shir of Rabbi Kiva and it was fun.
Okay, that's already Chazal. So I'm just saying is, in other words, all we're saying is that there seems to be here a very clear machlokes dispute. That's already done in Kabbalah. There's already in Nigla. But I'm saying is, but be that as it may, whatever Chazal knew by then, there's nothing clear about it. That it's clear that Reb Chaim Volozhin is coming to take very strong issue with the Baal Tanya, and perhaps with the Ari, even though he seems to be interpreting, maybe he'll interpret the Ari a different way. But this is what the Reb Chaim Volozhin is saying. Yeah.
Rav Triebitz once quoted Reb Chaim Volozhin's Hakdama to Tzafed Sneasa.
Yeah.
Where he's defending the Baal, he says the Baal Tanya accused the Grav not taking the Arizal all that seriously, and he defends the Grav, says he did take him seriously. But in fact, it sounds like there was a very big discrepancy between the way
Reb Chaim
understood the Arizal and...
Reb Chaim Volozhin did, in other words, Reb Chaim, if you read Hakdama very, very carefully, all Reb Chaim does is that Ari certainly had tremendous respect for the Ari. But it doesn't mean he couldn't argue. He doesn't say that.
Who says he can't argue on Arizal?
No. The Baal Tanya writes in a very famous letter to his Hasidim that the Goa didn't believe that the Ari's Torah came from Eliyahu Navi, maybe one or two things, and that's it. They came from his chochma. So therefore the Goyim felt that he could argue on him. Okay? The Reb Chaim Volozhin, in his Hakdama to Safed Sneasa, right, writes about the Goyim's reverence for the Ari, and it's clearly a reaction to this letter. And he says that whenever the guy would mention the Ari, he would tremble. Fine, he had respect for the Ari. But he doesn't say, Chas v'shalom, the guy never felt he couldn't argue on the Ari. Yeah.
The Rav was in the middle of saying that the nafkamina is what the role of the Arizal could be.
In halachic, right. In halachic, right. In other words, according to Reb Chaim Volozhin, the Ari's Kabbalah cannot in any way undo something which is taught in the Torah Sadikla. That would be the nafkamina. There are many things in the Ari which appear to be, I wouldn't say a contradiction to halacha, but not in complete accordance with Allah. This is something we've spoken about by the Poskim. Many cases like this. I mean, the famous Machlokes, the Chazon Ish, and the going over the Yud and the Tzaddik of the Ari, or for example, even coming up to, a few months before Pesach, the arrangement of the Seder plate, in which the Ari argues purely on the Rabot, the law is based upon the concept of Ma'avir Ala Mitzvahs. I mean, there are many places, there's a list of all these places where the Ari seems to be saying, which seems to be somehow a little bit contrary to the Torah HaNigla. So it's clear here that Rav Chaim, so in other words, if you say the Ari HaSaga, the Moshe Rabbeinu, so the Nachanami.
But we would only have to, in order to say that the Arizal could modify in some way the halacha, all you have to say is that he was a bigger chacham than Moshe Rabbeinu. Because chacham.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Though, if you say Arizal had hasagas higher than Moshe Rabbeinu, so you could say you could argue.
No, it's not. It's chacham.
Whatever it is.
The Rambam would be masking this for Keret. The
Rambam says that Moshe Rabbeinu reached the highest level of chacham than anyone will ever reach.
No, the Rambam holds that chachma, through chachma, that's how you modify halacha, through chachma.
No, but Moshe Rabbeinu is the highest level of chacham.
The Rambam says that?
Yeah, that's in the Sefer Thinker.
Yes,
he says
that he was the biggest.
No, the greatest hasag of seichel is Nashon the Rambam. The greatest hasag of seichel. That's very important. And the Rambam is mashma like this here too.
Do we see in the Tanya that he groups Moshe Rabbeinu with the other Nevi'im?
No, chas v'shalom.
He mentioned that it's a.
Moshe Rabbeinu Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest apprehension of Nevuah, but the Arizal's apprehension is higher.
And the Tanya is masking to this?
Yes, I mean he explains it, but at the end he's masking to that. Yes, the Arizal says like that. Okay, in other words, there's no question about it. Rambam understood this. We have here a clear. Now, what I want to do is.
I don't find anyone in Kabbalah that I know about.
Yeah.
that some based on some Kabbalistic principle, we're trying to overturn some Dairaisa that Moshe Rabbeinu presented us with. It's always like deciding on a Teresh al Peh between.
No.
Take the sheet.
Well, not if you look at the Chazon Ish writes in about regarding the tzaddik. The Arizal tzaddik backward tzaddik, what he writes about. This is the Gemara speaks. The Gemara speaks about how a person's bed should be. I mean, there's a machlokes the Zoya, and the Gemara they read pasuk like the Zoya.
So would we say that the Ari in that case is being chaylik on Moshe Rabbeinu?
He's being chaylik on the Teres HaNigla. If you say the Teres HaNigla is part of the Vor Moshe Rabbeinu, then that's what it seems to be.
No, but it's a machlokes, isn't it?
Okay, this is something that's spoken about. This, in other words, it's clear. In other words, this is a. This, in other words, the Goyen actually, ruled like the Gemara. I'm just saying is that is clear. I mean, there's much ink has been spilled on this, that there are many places where the Aris, Kabbalah appears to argue upon the Teres HaNigla, the things in the Halacha, which ultimately come from Moshe Rabbeinu.
I mean, because he paskins like Rav Shimon Chai when others don't. That means that he's arguing.
No, that's not even like Rishim Machai. I mean, in Ma'avir Mitzvahs, everybody's minded to, but the Ari Seder plate is different. I mean, there are many places where the Ari comes in contrast to this. I mean, look what the Chazon Ish writes about the Ari Tzaddik. He's clearly arguing on the halacha. In other words, much ink is built to that. I'm sure that there are people who say he's not really arguing this and that. Is that important? The important thing is that we see clearly the Nefesh HaChaim, right, clearly understood the Tanya is implying that, and wrote with Rabbi Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, I would like to say something interesting, is that the Reb Chaim Volozhiner speaks about Adam HaRishon. As well as Moshe Rabbeinu, and Reb Chaim Volozhiner says that actually the only two people whose neshama was actually inside their bodies was Adam HaRishon and was Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what Chaim Volozhiner says.
Where is that?
He says this in Perek Tezvav of Shar Aleph.
But then it came out again.
What?
But then it came out again?
But it came out. After the Cheder came out again. After the Cheder, it was Bastalik from him. But Moshe Rabbeinu got it back. I mean, at least got the shaman back into his good. Even though he does say that the Tamei Mitzvahs, he does write about the Tamei Mitzvahs, Atachlisam, will not reveal to anyone, even not to Moshe Rabbeinu, Rak Adam HaRishon before the Chet. Before the Chet. In other words, Adam HaRishon was the highest intellect in history before the Chet. After the Chet, Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest intellect. His neshama is within his body. It would appear, though, that somehow, for some reason, Adam HaRishon is on a high level before the Chai. That's what he says. Now, I would like to present something from the Leshem on the Chai of Adam HaRishon. And perhaps the Leshem, at the end of the Sefer Deya, has what's called the Drush Eitz Hadas. And there he speaks about the Chet of Adam HaRishon. It's page 289 in the Sefer Deya. Actually, he speaks about Chet of HaRishon in several other places, and he has an entire Hadam introduction to this. And the Leshem here is speaking about what exactly was he's bothered by several questions. One question was, well, how could he say it? How could he be chayta? That's the first question of the Leshem. He speaks about that too. But then he speaks about, and he goes deeply into this, exactly what was the chet. So what I want to do is that I want to go to what's called Siman Gimel, which is page 290. And there are many Simon and Leshem Kedaka B'Kodesh has tremendous arichas, tremendous bekiyas and chazal, zoyas, everything. It's spectacular, like everything else he writes. And but in Siman Gimel, he speaks about the chet of the Eitz Hadas. Okay? So let me read you what the Leshem says. And this is going to be very relevant to everything we've been speaking about. Ha'inyan da'achilas Eitz Hadas, asher hizra HaKosh Baruch Hu HaRishon. So the achila, the eating from the Eitz Hadas, right? Which Kadosh Baruch Hu, of course, warned on the Berishon not to do. Who koidal gimel devara includes three things, says the Leshem. Echad, number one, is actual achila mamish, actually eating. Okay, it says, explain this. Second thing, the Isra Zivuk, that based upon Zoya, the Leshem says that the Rishon was supposed to have first been with Chava first on Shabbos, not on Erev Shabbos. I'm not going to go into that now. That's the second thing. Okay? Then Gimel. What's the third prohibition? Hu haskola vadas. It's intellectual apprehension. Shu nichol gamkin b'loshen achila, which is also include loshen of achila. Because achila can mean physical eating, it could be relationships, and it could also be haskola vadas, intellectual apprehension. He says, he brings a pasuk in Yechezkel, Echos, a Megillah Hazois, in Yeshayahu. Then he brings a Shashir Mraba, Nimshlet Vayter, B'mayim, B'yayin, B'shem, V'dvash. Harei Lanu, says Rabbeinu HaLeshem, Harei Lanu, Ki Haskola Vadas, Hu Nichlo Gam Ken B'loshen Achila. Apprehension, knowledge, is also included in Achila. No, so therefore, so what was the prohibition of eating from the Eitz Hadas? Shelo yizboinen v'yistakel b'shum inyan asher yesh lo lahara achiza boy. That Adam HaRishon was forbidden to reflect, to look and reflect upon anything which would have a connection with evil. Lahara achiza boy. K'dei shelo yumshach l'yistakel, because he should not be brought to look, but koiches hachitzonim atzman, because based upon this shouldn't be brought to look at the foreign powers, lachkov ladas b'kocheseyam, and to try to understand them at kama shemagia. Kidei shulespat achreim, you shouldn't be enticed by them. Ki b'teva adam hu b'chol mashem is boinen, because the teva, the nature of a person, that what it reflects upon, who mizdabek boy, right? He connects with. Ki seichel v'amaskel v'muskel echadu kanoida, seichel, maskel, muskel, like the knower, the known, the act of knowledge are one and the same. It's a terrible thing. He spoke to Mishlei, etc., etc. And the end, actually, he does say afterwards, after a person has to look into, explore things too, because that's after the Chet. Okay. What does this mean? What does the Leshem mean by apprehension of anything which has a connection with evil. So I want to propose what the Leshem is speaking about. I want to propose the Leshem is speaking about scientific knowledge of the world of the type that was shown to Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, what I want to claim is, according to Leshem, I think this is probably Bashman the Ramchal too, in Das Tavunas, that Adam HaRishon was the job of Adam HaRishon was to look directly at the spiritual worlds and not to focus or delve deeply into the physical world. Because the physical world, of course, anything which is physical, this is what's called an achiza. There's a connection with evil. Adam HaRishon was supposed to have apprehended the purely spiritual worlds, and with that, he would have brought the world to its perfection directly, without going through physicality. What did Adam HaRishon do? He decided to pursue science. He decided to focus his intellect on the physical world, which in and of itself, Leshem seems to be saying in and of itself, is not evil, but there's an achiza, there's a connection with evil. Once a person focuses on the underpinnings of the physical world, he can be drawn to things which are evil. So, what's interesting is, it could possibly be that what the Leshem means by this is that, in fact, the true Tanya mitzvahs, which are in the spiritual worlds, as Nefesh HaChaim says, were only given to Adam HaRishon. After the chayt, after the sin, the deep understandings of the forces of nature, which is also, according to the Ari, a very high level of intellect. I mean, according to Leshem, is a high level of intellect. He speaks about this in the Sefer Chochma. I'm not going right now. The Leshem certainly respected scientific knowledge. But nonetheless, Moshe Rabbeinu, right? The chochma Moshe Rabbeinu was, according to the Rambam, right, is exactly this scientific knowledge, which Adam HaRishon before the chait pursued and consequently was drawn to sin. After the chait, after the sin, right? So this knowledge, in a certain sense, is permitted to pursue, as the Leshem says in several places, only because, man now has fallen from the level of Adam HaRishon. So, what I want to say is that we see that it's clear to me, I'm proposing it, but it's clear to me that what the Leshem is saying is that the knowledge that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, this deep knowledge of the physical world, was exactly represents the chait of Adam HaRishon, and as a consequence of this, it is true that chochma was within. You might agree with that, is that the chochma was in the kuf of Moshe Rabbeinu, but in this sense, in the sense that, in other words, after the chait of Adam HaRishon, in other words, Adam HaRishon had a hasag of the time mitzvahs that would now be given to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what I would. That's what the fact I now. Of course, the Leshem does speak about Moshe Rabbeinu. It does understand Moshe Rabbeinu had a hasag, at least intuitive hasag of higher worlds. What I'm saying is that the Leshem's shita, general shita, is that the Rambam is before the tzimtzum. He says this right, and the Ari is after the tzimtzum. But we see clearly is that the Leshem is categorizing the chochma of the Rambam as being the sin of Adam HaRishon, right, before the chait. And this is how the Leshem understands it. So, in other words, we can understand the Rambam's understanding of Moshe Rabbeinu's intellectual apprehension, according to the Leshem, as in the context of the chait of Adam HaRishon. I think really what the Leshem wants to say.
Where does that leave the Arizal according to the Leshem?
Anyway, he speaks about it. I don't want to go into it right now. I'm going to go. The rest has another take on Moshe Rabbeinu too. But I just want to mention this thing here, that this is I think this is the beer of the Tanya mitzvahs that the Nefesh HaChaim is speaking about. That's what he speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu is a long thing on Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not I don't want to go into this right now.
According to Nefesh HaChaim, Moshe Rabbeinu was higher than Adam HaRishon after the chait. According to Leshem, he was not.
According to Nefesh HaChaim, what are you saying that?
Moshe's chochma
Was not as high as that Adam HaRishon. No, it was never as high. It was not as high. No, it was not as high as Adam HaRishon before the Chet.
according to Nefesh HaChaim.
According to Nefesh HaChaim,
But it was
right.
higher than Adam's after the Chet.
Right.
And according to the Leshem, just
No. According to the Nefesh HaChaim,
yes.
Moshe Rabbeinu there was no aspect of chochma that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't apprehend, except for the Arizal before the Chet. But that was not revealed to anybody. Okay? And all I'm saying is that that's what the Nefesh HaChaim says. So therefore, how could it possibly be that Moshe Rabbeinu's intellectual apprehension, right, was not as great as Adam HaRishon before the Chet? So I'd say the Beer, it says, is in the Leshem. That the Adam HaRishon looked to understand deeply the connection of everything in the physical world, right? Which the Rambam defines, in fact, actually as being the intellectual apprehension of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Leshem then defines that with the Chet of Adam HaRishon. In other words, this intellectual apprehension of Moshe Rabbeinu, according to the Rambam, the Leshem identifies with the Chet of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, now after the Chet, Moshe Rabbeinu, probably perceived. Right after the Chet of Adam HaRishon, so Moshe Rabbeinu probably. According to Leshem, he apprehends spiritual things too. But I'm just saying is that it's interesting is that this which the Rambam identifies with Moshe Rabbeinu as the Chet of Adam HaRishon, which means what I'm really saying, I guess I'll say it explicitly, is that in a certain sense, the pursuit of scientific truth, which for the Rambam is the essence of the voice of Moshe Rabbeinu, is understood by the Leshem as being the reason for the Chet of Adam HaRishon. That's what the Leshem is saying. Yeah.
Can I connect this into what we talked about last week?
Yes.
Which is that the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu needed this level of total intellectual awareness is to enable him to be the start of this process of hermeneutics.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's clearly in the Rambam.
Right. And therefore...
Because the Rambam, by the way, I want to read, why is it clear in the Rambam? Because in chapter 54, the Rambam leads intellectual perfection as being higher than that of almost all the mitzvahs. Yeah.
Right. So we're not really talking in this forum as so much about the scientific side of it, but the hermeneutical side of it. So what does this have to say about Adam HaRishon's relations with hermeneutics and his method of connecting with God? It seems to be that this was something of an aveira at the time.
Maybe, could be. Adam HaRishon was, look, we're speaking about things we don't understand, but I'm saying is, I'm not sure. I mean, there is a Gemara that says that the Kodesh Baruch Hu showed Adam HaRishon dor v'dor shav, which you could interpret in many ways. You could interpret that he had all some total knowledge, so there was no hermeneutics involved. I mean, Adam HaRishon's his goal, in other words, his job was not hermeneutics. Hermeneutics begins after the Chet of Adam HaRishon, so that's that's in that sense you could say it like that. But I'm saying is that right. This is all I'm doing is explaining what the Nefesh HaChaim meant. I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Is there a thing there's machlokes between Leshem and Rambam?
Is it mostly Leshem and Rambam? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure there is mostly Leshem and Rambam. Yeah, but
the content of Moshe Rabbeinu's intellect is what enabled his apprehension of Kol Ter Kula, which is l'chayra.
Right. For sure. For sure, the Leshem. Look, there's not a. For sure, he's arguing, because if he regards this as Chet of HaRishon, so it's not what the Rambam says. We should grasp intellect on any one person, including Adam HaRishon. I would imagine, according to the Rambam, Adam HaRishon did not reach a level of apprehension of Moshe Rabbeinu. He doesn't speak about Adam HaRishon like that. The Rambam says Moshe Rabbeinu reached a level of intellectual greater than anyone who came before him, and one after it. That includes Adam HaRishon. The Leshem is claiming that this is the Chet of Adam HaRishon, Moshe Rabbeinu's intellectual apprehension. So, in that sense, the Leshem is arguing on Moshe Rabbeinu, on the Rambam.
It's not a subtle machlokes.
Yeah, but that's what he's arguing. I'm just saying it's interesting is that this gap between Adam HaRishon before the Chet and Moshe Rabbeinu's Asakid, Nefesh HaChaim, is filled in by the Leshem.
Why is it clear to the Rav that the source of Ra and the source of evil for the Leshem must be the physics?
What is it? The spiritual world?
I don't know.
I think it is. I would say that the source of evil is physicality. I think everybody would agree with that. The source of evil is physicality.
Isn't it in Hasidus you have it could be some kind of apprehension of choice, of man's choice, of man's.
But it's a chizin physical. If the angels don't sin, it's a chiz. Ra, evil, has an achiza, has a connection only with something which is physical. If we're not physical, it's not possible to sin.
But within physical, there might be
good too, right? But I'm just saying this. But it has an achiza in it. There's an achiza in it. That's what I'm saying. In other words, look, if the Leshem would have said he looked into Ra, it's one thing. He didn't say that. He looked into anything with a Ra can have an achiza. Look, this is my understanding of the Leshem, but I think that there's no alternative understanding of the Leshem. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot to speak about here, but I think we're going to leave things as such before we enter into things we shouldn't be speaking about. But in any case, but I think we have here a interesting panorama or a historical understanding of where Moshe Rabbeinu's intellectual operation is in relationship to how it was understood in the other generations. But I think with this we're going to conclude with the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. The next principle, which is the 8th principle, is Terem and Hashamayim. And that's here the Rambam Shita, the Rambam's understanding is fleshed out fully in this principle. It's after Moshe Rabbeinu, I think it's the longest principle. I think what I would suggest that people should look at for next week's shir would be actually very importantly, the Shara Sheni of the Rambam. The Shara Sheni of the Rambam, which he speaks about the drashas, what is from Moshe Rabbeinu, what is not from Moshe Rabbeinu, what is Ben Hashemayim, what is not Ben Hashemayim, and we'll speak about we'll try to understand the Shara Shemini, the 8th principle, in the light of what the Rambam says throughout in the Mishnah Torah, the Shirashim Sefer Mitzvahs, and exactly what the Rambam understands to be Torah Ben Hashemayim. That will be Mitzvah Shem next week. Okay, for an undisclosed place, we shall learn Kodesh. Have a good week.